Ken Martin needs to step down. He needs to step down as the DNC chair, and he needs to do it immediately. If anybody didn't see this yesterday, they finally released the autopsy of the 2024 contest. Not only is it incomplete, it looks like it was written by AI. Infuriating and incompetent. Ken Martin for the longest time said that he was not going to release it because he didn't want to distract it from all the special contests that were going around the country last fall. And everybody kept saying, but if we want to learn from it, why not just release it? Same thing when he went on Pod Save America and he said there's not like a smoking gun or anything. And Jon Favreau said, then release it. And now you see why he didn't want to release it. He hired his buddy to make said autopsy. All he had to do was just come out and tell the truth. We haven't released it because the people that we have hired for this is not doing a good job. So then you fire them and get somebody that knows what they're doing to be appointed to it. But he didn't do that. So not only did you show why the blue team is not a cohesive unit right now, you became the distraction, Ken. You became the story. Now, I have my own opinions of what happened in 2024, but this left out so many things that were glaring issues, particularly not mentioning a certain I country trying to occupy Gaza. So this is just embarrassing. But silver lining, the DNC is underfunded, but the candidates that are in races across the country, their donations are going up. So the money is going directly to the candidates. Now, with that being said, they need to get this resolved before 28. So if you're curious, it's 192 pages, but in summary, it's not good. Ken Martin, you need to tell the truth and you need to step down.
So the DNC finally released their 2024 autopsy report, right? And it's been sitting for months because Ken Martin kept saying it wasn't ready to go public. He had all these excuses lined up, special contests happening, distractions around the country. The whole thing wasn't ready for prime time. But here's what's crazy. Once it actually came out, Democratic leaders started calling for his resignation immediately. And I'm talking about people inside the party, frustrated donors, people who actually know what they're looking at. And they're all saying the same thing. This report is incomplete. It's avoiding the real issues. And it looks like Ken Martin sat on it because he knew exactly how bad it was going to look. The report came out. Everybody saw it. And instead of clearing things up, it made everything worse. So the DNC is bleeding donors. Leadership is panicking. And the whole party is realizing that their chair basically chose to hide the truth instead of facing it head on. This isn't complicated. This is about a basic failure of accountability, and that's what we're going to break down today. So look, Ken Martin hired somebody to write this autopsy. And from the jump, the work was sloppy and incomplete. The whole purpose of the autopsy or a commission is within the Democratic Party. What that means is they basically have individuals they hire to look over, to right their wrongs, to basically readjust when things aren't going the right way, to keep things on the right trajectory so they can continue to boost the Democratic Party, to continue to have their support and also get votes. And also donors back them because they support what they're doing by giving them money, fundraising wise, so they can continue to campaign and put ads and everything elsewhere, spreading their message. So the chairman is the one that actually hires the commission, which is to investigate policy issues and make sure it's up to par while they continue to push out to the people, their voter base, and the voters they anticipate to gain when election cycles come around. They can campaign on it and as a way of connecting and resonating with the people. But the chairman, Ken Martin, was sloppy. Like I said, he gets the report back and it's not what he wanted to see. So what does he do? He sits on it for months. He makes excuses about special contests and about distractions and about how the timing wasn't right. Meanwhile, people are asking him directly, why not just release it if there's nothing to hide? He goes on Pod Save America, which is a podcast, and he tells Jon Favreau, there's no smoking guns. So if that's the case, why are we waiting? That's when you know something was wrong, because any leader who knows they got good news releases it immediately. They don't wait around. They don't make excuses. Ken Martin was waiting because he knew what the report said, and he knew releasing it would make him look incompetent. When he finally released it under pressure, his excuse was that the contractors didn't do good work. And you know what? Maybe that's true. But here's the problem with that excuse is if you hire someone to do a job and they fail, you fire them and you get somebody better, just like you just heard in that clip. You don't just release the bad work anyway and hope nobody notices. That's not leadership. That's avoiding responsibility. And the Democratic Party is full of people who are tired of that play. And the report leaves out massive things that actually happened in 2024. Gaza isn't mentioned once, even though that was a real issue in some races. Biden stepping down and how that whole process went down, not addressed, and how the money was actually spent. We all seen with Kamala Harris and her campaign. She basically had a lot of money campaign wise being fundraised from donors, and she basically dispersed it and spread it all out and spent all of it on entertainers like Beyonce and so forth, Cardi B. And you know how that turned out when it comes to her actually overspending. So where the resources went, what decisions were made with those resources, you're not getting a real answer on that either. And these aren't small things. These are the actual problems that Democrats need to understand if they ever going to win again. And Ken Martin released a report that basically tells you water is wet and then pretends he did the work. Democrats inside the party are furious because they know this autopsy doesn't explain what really happened in 2024. It's a surface level document that avoids the hard truths. And that's exactly the kind of thing that makes people lose faith in their leadership. When the leader chooses excuses over truth, when they hide the real problems instead of facing them, people stop believing in them. And that's not politics, that's just human nature. You show people that you're willing to lie to them or hide things from them, and they're done with you. Ken Martin turned himself into the distraction instead of doing the actual work, and now his own party is turning against him. And this is what happens when leaders decide that protecting themselves is more important than being honest with the people they're supposed to serve. Now, here's where it gets really serious because the credibility problem Ken Martin created isn't just about optics or party drama, it's crashing their actual financial situation. The DNC, as you guys can see on the screen right now, has $14.4 million on hand, but they're sitting on $17.5 million in debt. That means they're $3 million in the hole and they're struggling to raise money to get out of it. Meanwhile, the Republican National Committee has 100 they have $123.9 million just sitting in their accounts. Think about that for a second. The Democrats are scrambling for cash while Republicans are operating from a position of overwhelming financial strength. That gap isn't an accident, and it's not because Republicans are naturally better at fundraising because usually Republicans don't have donors as much because they're more conservative, right? They use the monies they have that they work hard for and they try to campaign the best way they can. And usually the Democrats, they tend to take money in regards of donors and cater to any base that will actually prop them up with monies. So that's why you never really see Republican candidates win because they don't have that much money usually on hand when it comes to campaign ads and things like that. So they have to be very strategic because they don't have as much money as the Democratic Party had propped up. That's why when Donald Trump came in, the ball game changed because he has his own money, right? So when you look at this, it's because donors made a decision about where their money is going, and they decided the Democratic Party isn't worth investing in anymore. And here's the thing that really matters. Donors used to give money directly to the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party or the DNC will control how that money got distributed and spent. Now donors are looking at the DNC's leadership and they're looking at the results they got in 2024 and they're seeing the bad autopsy and the excuses and they're saying no thanks. Because why would you keep investing money in something where they can't even document clearly in this autopsy of where they went wrong to show you that they're willing to right their wrongs and do right? So why would you think somebody can keep investing their money in it and trusting them to donate their money in a cause that's just going to continue to be a liability? So they're giving their money to individual candidates instead, directly to the people running for office in their own districts or states. When money stops flowing through the party and starts flowing directly to candidates, you're watching the establishment lose control of its own organization. That's exactly what's happening right now. And this tells you everything you need to know about what people actually think of the Democratic Party brand. Like I was saying, family, this tells you everything you need to know about what people actually think of the Democratic Party brand. If people believed in the party, if they trusted the leadership, they'll give to the party and let the professionals handle the strategy. They don't do that anymore because they don't believe. They looked at the party, they seen the failures, and they decided to cut out the middleman and fund the candidates they actually trust. The problem with that for the establishment is that when the DNC can't control the money flow, they can't control what candidates win the primaries. You understand what that means? It means the people at the top, the old guard Democrats, the rhino Democrats, they like to call them in Congress, the party machinery that's been running things, they're losing their grip on the power. The money is flowing to whoever can convince donors they're worth funding. And right now, that's not always the establishment picks. This is how the far left wing has been gaining so much ground inside the Democratic Party. It's not that suddenly everyone became a radical or that young people are voting in massive numbers. It's that the money that used to be controlled by the establishment is now flowing directly to candidates and causes that the far left supporters. Let me break it down even further. Let me explain it more simply because that might sound confusing. The money that used to be controlled by the establishment is now flowing directly to candidates and causes for the far left voter base that they have to feed to just even have some type of hopes that they will be invested in by donors. Because the far left has figured out how to organize small donor monies or small dollar donors and raise money outside the traditional party structure. And when that money is flowing to the far left instead of the mainstream establishment, the far left gets to pick which candidates run and which one gets the resources to win. And Ken Martin and the DNC establishment are watching their power slip away in real time, and it's because donors stop believing in them. This financial collapse reveals something way deeper than just a budget problem. It shows you what happens when leadership stops delivering results and starts making excuses.
Meantime, in disarray after the release of the DNC's 2024 autopsy, with Chairman Ken Martin reportedly scrambling to calm donors and apoplectic progressive groups, mad that the report makes zero mention of Gaza. Joining us now, Dan Cannon, former Battleground State Director for the Harris-Walz campaign, and Alex Sawyer, Washington Times editor-at-large. Great to see you both this Friday afternoon. So Axios had some really choice quotes from Democrats about Ken Martin. He should resign, Representative Seth Moulton told Axios, citing his lack of leadership and saying it's utterly nuts it took us this long to release the autopsy. In a radio interview Thursday, Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin, said in response to a caller who argued Martin should be replaced, "I agree. Having what we have right now is not doing it." And then Rep. Mark Vesey, Democrat from Texas, told Semaphore that there doesn't seem to be a plan to turn things around and the clock is ticking. I believe it's time for him to move on. Dan, is it time for Ken Martin to take the high dive?
What's the Will Rogers quote, John? You know, I don't belong to a political party. I'm a Democrat, organized party. I'm a Democrat. There feels like that a little bit right now for us. But I will say the autopsy was clearly indefensible. This product was not well done, obviously leaked and then released in full with annotations, not complete. And it's pretty hard to make this look good for Ken or the DNC. But on the record in races in 2025, Democrats have flipped 30 seats. They've outperformed in something like 90% of the districts. They're driving towards a strong midterm, hopefully in the fall. And that will tell the story really of whether this has been a successful run for him and for Democrats, not this report, which clearly was botched.
Ken Martin on the report itself said this, Alex: "When I received the report late last year, it wasn't ready for prime time, not even close. And because no source material was provided, fixing it would have meant starting over from the beginning. Every conversation, every interview, every data set. But under pressure, he decided to go ahead and release it so many months later that it's doing so much more damage."
Well, the quote said that he thought the report wasn't ready for prime time. I'm not sure he's ready for prime time. I think he's kind of sucking the air and all the oxygen right ahead of primaries, midterms. They could have had this in the news cycle months ago, as you mentioned, which I think would have been better for Democrats, to be honest. And then furthermore, you talked a little bit about the wins, but there's also been a fundraising issue. I was looking at past couple months. I think that the DNC took in about 10 million compared to RNC was at 18. I think the Republicans have 100+ million on hand. Democrats are looking at 15 or so. They have millions of debt. RNC doesn't. I think under his tenure, it might be time to turn the page. If I was a Democrat, I would be open to it.
So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was just hopping mad about the fact that there was no mention of Gaza whatsoever in this autopsy. Listen to what she said.
I think it's pretty unbelievable that Gaza would not be mentioned once in the autopsy report. I think it was very clearly a major dynamic and a major thread that was happening in 2024. Regardless of how one feels about that issue, the fact that it's not even addressed, I think is a major oversight. And I think that for young people, it was a huge part of the environment.
So let's just say, for you-know-whats and giggles, that you were writing this report. What would you say about Gaza in terms of, did it harm the Democratic Party? Did it help them?
You know, John, I think we make this into such a gotcha moment for Democrats. It doesn't have to be. There's data we can look at. I'll point to Michigan, for example. You can see where Alyssa Slotkin, who won a very close race as a Democrat, just barely on the right side of the 50% mark, and then Kamala Harris lost a very close race, president. You can see where the delta was between those two. In Dearborn, there was like a 30,000 vote delta between Harris and Slotkin. That was not enough to have Harris win, but that was clearly important. But then right next door, Macomb County, manufacturing, blue collar, there was also a 30 or 40,000 vote delta between Slotkin and Harris. And I know that Trump went to Macomb County a lot and talked about China and EVs and autos. And so it's pretty evident to me, just based on the data, both things hurt. The combination of the two clearly affected Harris's ability to win where Slotkin did win. I don't think it's got to be a gotcha conversation for Democrats. We can look at that and say, that was an issue, the data's present, now let's discuss what we do about it.
Well, here's one observation that Ken Martin made. He said, we can't just be anti-Trump, we must have an affirmative agenda to sell the American people. Yeah, by and large, all we hear about is Trump, 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 Trump.
Very true. And I think that they have come up with the term affordability. I mean, we've been hearing about it nonstop, so we'll see how that plays. The second thing I would bring up, though, is Israel Gaza has been highlighted as being missing from the report, but also the whole addressing Biden stepping down, how it went down with Kamala Harris being kind of crowned the replacement. There was no open primary. That was something I know Democratic voters were very upset about. They wish they could have had their voice heard more. And so I think it was a real swing and a miss.
Yeah, well, we'll see how much lingering effect that it has. Dan, Alex, good to talk to you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Sandra?
So now Democrats are going to sit around and tell you that Gaza is the reason they lost 2024. And yeah, that's the conversation they want to have because it confirms what they already believe about their base and about politics in general. But let's be real about something. Gaza is not why Kamala Harris lost. That's the story that makes Democratic leaders feel better about themselves because it's easier to blame an international conflict than to look in the mirror and admit they ran a bad campaign and push bad policies. The people who are most upset about Gaza, the ones screaming about it online, the ones making it the centerpiece of their political identity, those people are mostly young voters who feel passionately about the issue. And the passion is real, don't get me wrong, but here's where the reality hits different. Young people who are passionate about Gaza don't vote at the same rate as older voters. That's just a fact. You can be upset about something all day long. You can post about it. You can protest about it. But if you don't show up on election day, your passion doesn't matter in the actual results. The people who actually vote, the people who decide elections are older voters. And older voters care about the economy. They care about what they can see and feel in their everyday lives. They care about whether their bills are getting paid, groceries cost too much, whether they can afford to live where they're living. When an older voter goes to the grocery store and see prices that have gone up 50% since 2020, they don't care about Gaza. They care about feeding their family. That's the vote that matters, and Democrats completely ignored that because they were focused on appeasing the online left. The real reasons Democrats lost in 2024 are straightforward. Bad policies that created bad results, straight up incompetence in how they ran things, and broken promises to the people who actually voted for them. Joe Biden mentally declined. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's something everyone could see happening. And instead of being honest with voters about what was going on, Democrats lied about it. They covered it up. Biden's own people were telling reporters that he was having senior moments. Confusion was happening in real time, and the party brass was out there telling everybody he was fine. He was sharp. He was ready to go. That's insulating to voters' that's insulting to voters' intelligence, and it matters. Then Kamala Harris got crowned, not chosen by Democratic voters in the primary, but literally handed the nomination after Biden was forced out. They staged a coup against Biden, forced him out of the race, and instead of letting the party vote on who should be the nominee, they just handed it to Harris because of her position in the administration. Voters felt like they weren't part of that decision. They felt like the party was making choices for them instead of with them, and that breaks something fundamental about the relationship between the party and its voters. Then Harris runs a campaign and blows over $1 billion, and you know where the money went? Like I said, celebrity appearances. Oprah Winfrey got money. They paid for interviews and endorsements for people who don't even live in swing states and can't even vote in those races. They spent money on Call Her Daddy podcast appearances instead of building an actual ground game in the neighborhoods where votes actually matter. That's not strategy. That's insanity. Ken Martin himself, the same guy who released that bad autopsy report, says something true in the middle of all of this. Like you guys just heard, quote unquote, we can't just be anti-Trump. We have to have an affirmative agenda. The quote is dead on, and it's the entire problem right there. The Democratic Party doesn't have an agenda anymore. It's not about what they want to do for people. It's not about solutions. It's not about results. It's just hate Trump every single day. That works when Trump is the alternative and people are scared enough. But it doesn't work when people are also looking at their own lives and seeing things aren't getting better. You can't win an election just by telling people to vote against something. You have to give them something to vote for. And Democrats came to 2024 with nothing except fear and anger at the other side. The party has no plan, no vision, no message. And beyond, quote unquote, the guy on the other side is bad and voters figure that out, that's why they lost. So now I want you guys to check out this clip.
I'm calling on the chair of the DNC, Ken Martin, to resign. The autopsy they just released was absolute dog shit. They don't have money. It's been over a year and a half since he was elected, and we are underwater. The DNC is $3 million in debt, while the RNC has over $100 million on hand. Our brand is a total disaster. Democrats are underwater in approval ratings. What has Ken Martin done to change that? It is time for new leadership. It could not be more clear than it ever has been. If you agree with that, sign our petition to call on DNC Chair Ken Martin to resign. It is time for the American people to take over the Democratic Party and make it what it always should have been, but has failed to be our entire lives.
Ken Martin should go?
I think he should. I mean, but before he leaves, I think we need an explanation as to what happened to the money, because everything flows from the money. There, as I said on Meet the Press, there's speculation that people were making decisions to line their pockets and not win this election. That is deplorable. A lot in this document that is not unpacked, and that's why my issue is it's not what's in it, because none of it that's in it is groundbreaking. It's what's not included. The issue of Gaza, which we're seeing affect all of these races all over the country, how the money was spent with strategic decisions. We're getting our butts kicked by Republicans on the ground. They're building new modern information ecosystems that we've not even started to invest in. I've been in the party 25 years, and the same 5 to 8 people have been making all the strategic decisions and all the money. So that's really the question.
So there you guys have it. They want Ken Martin to resign. They're turning on the rhinos, which is the older individuals at the party, basically saying they're stuck on yesteryear. And you guys see the infighting happen in real time. That's why I wanted to show you guys that last clip. Ken Martin knew that the report was going to be a disaster from the moment he received it. He got it back, looked at what was there, and immediately understood that releasing it would expose him as someone who couldn't even manage the basic function of conducting a proper party autopsy. So instead of dealing with the problem directly, he made excuses and sat on it for months. He said the contractors didn't do good work. And that's just the depth of accountability is what I'm talking about here. This is why I'm giving you the context, because the timing wasn't right. There were special contests happening that required his attention. All these reasons why the report couldn't come out yet. But here's where the reality breaks down for him. If you hire someone to do a job and they don't do it right, you don't just sit on their bad work for months and then release it anyway, hoping nobody notices. You fire them. That's how it works in real world. You take ownership of the failure, you correct it, and you put out something that actually represents your organization with competence. Ken Martin didn't do any of that. He just released the incomplete record and crossed his fingers that people would accept it. And this isn't some technical mistake or a timing issue that got blown out of proportion. This is a complete failure of accountability at the highest levels of the Democratic Party, and it's the exact reason people are walking away from the organization. And when you're leading something, whether it's a party, a business, a nonprofit, and you fail at your job, you have two choices. You either own the failure, fix it, and come out stronger on the other side, or you hide it and hope nobody notices. And in the real world, if you hide a failure instead of fixing it, you get fired. It's not harsh or unfair. That's just how things work. If I'm running a company and I hire someone, running my company, hiring someone to deliver a product that comes out broken, and instead of fixing it, I just release the broken product and hope nobody complains. I'm going to lose my job. My board is going to replace me. My customers are going to take their business somewhere else. That's accountability in action. But in politics, Ken Martin tried to play that same game, and now Democratic leaders inside the party are calling for his resignation. You know what? They're right to do it if that's how they feel. They're not being unreasonable or emotional or playing politics. They're following basic common sense. When you can't even manage to get in a report done right, how are you supposed to manage a national political party? When you can't tell the truth about why you lost an election, how are you going to win the next one? The DNC is falling apart right now, and it's not because of one bad report sitting on a shelf somewhere. It's because nobody trusts the leadership anymore. Donors are walking away because they see an organization that's broken, that's dishonest about its own failures, and that's completely incompetent at executing the basic functions of a political party. And you can't rebuild trust with excuses and delays. You can't rebuild trust by hiding the truth. You rebuild trust by being honest and about what went wrong, and taking responsibility for it and actually fixing it. Ken Martin did none of these things, and now his own party is in open revolt against him. That's what accountability looks like when it's missing. So the DNC autopsy situation teaches us something fundamental about what leadership actually means and what happens when you choose excuses over truth. You can't fix a problem until you're completely honest about what went wrong. And that's just how fixing problems work. But the Democratic Party, under Ken Martin's leadership, chose to hide the problem instead of facing it. He had a chance to be honest with his party about what happened in 2024 to give people real answers so they could understand where things went wrong and how to do better next time. And instead, he sat on that autopsy, made excuses, and released an incomplete document that avoided all the hard questions. Now, his own party is against him, donors leaving, organizations in a financial crisis, and that's not a coincidence. That's just a natural consequence of choosing excuses over honesty. This is what happens when leaders stop listening to the people they're supposed to serve. And the working person, the everyday voter, they're walking away from the Democratic Party because they don't feel heard anymore. The party spent billions of dollars on celebrity endorsements instead of listening to what people actually need. And they staged the coup against Biden and crowned Harris as the nominee instead of letting voters have a voice in that decision, releasing a fake autopsy instead of facing hard truths about why they lost. And now they're shocked that donors fled and leaders are forced to resign. So the lesson here is simple and it applies everywhere. Accountability matters, truth matters, and if you don't deliver results, you don't stay in power. That's not just politics, that's just how the world works. This moment is an opportunity for the Democratic Party to rebuild with new leadership willing to be honest. They could look at 2024, face what actually happened, and start building something real. But until they do that, the party keeps bleeding support. People can sense a lie from a mile away. If you want more real talk about what's actually happened in politics instead of spinning excuses, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next breakdown. I'll catch you in the next one, family. On that note, peace.